Frank Seravalli dropped the new trade target list, and no surprise, Brandon, that Connor Hellebuyck, Mark Scheifele, Pierre-Luc Dubois, and Blake Wheeler all find themselves on that list.
Yeah, and I like that Logan Stanley is next man up at 26 out of 25. So you just had to throw in a fifth to make the list there. It's funny too because I saw, wasn't the article titled "Summer of Chevy" or something like that?
Yep, exactly.
Let's hope the sequel's better than the original, because last year was also supposed to be the Summer of Chevy, and we didn't see any fireworks really take place there. So I don't know. I don't know if I think I'm officially in I'll believe it once I see it mode, because we heard a lot of the same things last year with the team in a similar spot in terms of the narrative surrounding the club, and not a whole lot was done. I don't know how far they went down in some of those talks, but ultimately it doesn't really matter how far you went down if you didn't make the moves to shape and to change the outlook of the franchise here. So
they kind of have to, though, now. I mean, that's part of the reason. I mean, like, we can talk about, how things didn't happen in the past, and I've made arguments that, if anything, some of these things are long overdue. But the fact of the matter is, Brandon, that you got Dubois for one more year, Scheifele for one more year, Hellebuyck for one more year. All of those players, they're just too good and too important for this franchise to lose for nothing. And if you don't have clarity on an extension with those players, and I'm not even sure that they would be interested in extending all three of them, some certainly more than others. I mean, that's kind of why people are expecting so much to happen, because it almost has to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with that, but at the same time, there was a mutiny last year, and they rolled back the same group of players this year to try and achieve a different result. So we'll see what happens. I mean, the one thing that's, I don't know if it's surprising me, but I just didn't really anticipate it. It's just the more and more smoke surrounding Connor Hellebuyck being maybe I don't know, the first, but certainly the biggest name out the door here in Winnipeg. It's gone from, I wonder what they're going to do with him. Do you wait? Do you do this? Do you do that? It sounds like he's officially on the market. I mean, he basically heads 4 different trade boards across certain different publications and networks right now. And it's tough to ignore it at this point, especially because it's been so quiet around the player himself. Like we've heard so much chatter, obviously, with PLD and his agent. I mean, Mark Scheifele spoke up last year, right? Blake Wheeler isn't afraid to speak his mind as well. But Hellebuyck's always kind of, gone under the radar there. But the fact that so many different people are saying so many different things and kind of insinuating that this seems to be the direction the Jets are going, I mean, that does kind of maybe lead me to believe this could actually be the summer of Chevy. And I'll tell you what, Huss, I mean, you say you're kind of forced into making some moves here. If Connor Hellebuyck wants out and it's a futures package coming back the other way, well, guess what? You just very well might be forced into making a couple other moves that maybe you didn't want to. And then we do see maybe not just 2 trades or something like that, but 3, 4, 5, maybe even 6 trades in a completely different team by the start of training camp.
Yeah, I mean, listen, we focus so much on the big 4, if you will. Hellebuyck, for the reasons you just mentioned, Dubois and Scheifele because of their contract, and the one guy that I think we know they tried to deal last year and didn't want to eat the salary, but it's never been more apparent after hearing what the guys had to say with their parting words at the end that, this organization, I think, knows that the time is now probably long past to move on from Blake Wheeler. The Wheeler trade, though, is a much bigger challenge right now. And, for a team that has not historically wanted to pay players to not play for them, I think it is. I mean, listen, it's a difficult situation and one that they didn't act on last year. But it's pretty clear that, for the culture of the team moving on and really doing what I think they were hoping that Rick Bowness could kind of instill on his own, pretty clear that is also a priority for the Winnipeg Jets. And but how that one is a lot easier said than done, especially if you don't want to eat a considerable amount of salary.
Yeah, and that's why I've been kind of banging the drum that I mean, they don't like to, but again, you're kind of forcing yourself into it here. I mean, they did it once with Mark Stewart, but I think the Jets go the buyout route with Blake Wheeler. I mean, even at, I know $4 million and a little bit of change isn't an absurdly high number for a team to take in in a trade, but man, I just don't see it going down that way. And I mean, they had the opportunity last summer. There were no takers on that. And even with the year left, I think the Jets are going to find themselves in a similar boat where you're pretty much presented with two choices. Do you want to eat half his salary for 1 year and likely give up an asset as well to move him along? Or do you want to have an additional cap hit next year, but you retain all of your assets? And I mean, you give up a little bit in terms of cap space. And to me, the latter one is the much more palatable option. And I mean, if you're one of those that cares about this sort of a thing, I mean, to me, that's kind of the more honorable route to go with your former captain is you can, buy him out, allow him his chance of picking his contending team if that's what he wants to ultimately go to. He gets to choose where he chases a cup for another year or two, and seemingly everybody's happy in this situation. So I don't. I mean, when we talk about trades and this and that, how many trades are going to happen, I really don't even include Blake Wheeler in it. I want to be beyond shocked if the Jets do end up trading him, because I really do believe that whether they're retooling or rebuilding, it just makes sense to me that you buy out Blake Wheeler pretty soon after the Stanley Cup final comes to an end in that initial buyout window. And then you go about trying to fill out the rest of your team after that. But that would be a pretty monumental. I know he's not the same guy that he was in terms of on-ice impact, but that is a pretty monumental step in a new direction for the franchise if that was to be their first official move of the offseason.
The thing that's fascinating when it comes to the other three is that, I mean, listen, if you're trading a Vezina-winning goaltender in your top two centers, I mean, that creates massive holes that, really I don't think you can just fill with other players and expect the same level of performance. You need to make it up in other areas. But the one thing that it does do, Brandon, is that it gives you options that might not be there if you were just trading a single player and looking to fill that hole. For instance, you might be able to tackle goaltending as part of a package for one of the centers, whereas Connor Hellebuyck, if you're trading him, you might be looking at a younger player that might be, through trading him, might be able to take the place of a Dubois or a Scheifele long term. I think it's quite clear from reading Frank's piece today and seeing and hearing the scuttlebutt from around the league that Hellebuyck, the demand for Hellebuyck will be as high as probably anybody on that trade list. What would make sense? I mean, if they realize they have to trade Connor Hellebuyck, what does that deal look like to you? Best case scenario for the Winnipeg Jets, or at least if you're Kevin Cheveldayoff, where does the ask begin for a guy that's been a Vezina finalist 3 of the last 6 years?
Yeah, so I mean, I think for all three guys, a first-round pick is part of the package to bring them anywhere they go, even with their contract situations. I mean, you just look at guys that have been traded with a year left on their deal, guys that have been traded at the deadline. It's sure. Generally, at the very least, a first, a high-end prospect, and then maybe a roster player to balance out money. So, I mean, a first-round pick is absolutely mandatory. There's no doubt about that. And that is the kind of intriguing thing there. If you move those three guys, you have 3 extra first-round picks potentially over the next 3 years to, either draft or move assets here and there. It gives you a lot of ammo to work with. But, I mean, I know I've said this before, and I don't want to repeat myself. I mean, it's all about high-end assets for me. So I'm not looking to, hey, can we get a first and can we get a third and then maybe a couple of prospects, something. It should be a first and your best young asset. If that's a 19-year-old kid, then great. If that's a 22-year-old up-and-coming goalie, I got no problem with that. If it's a 21-year-old top 4 blue liner whoever that person is, those should be the 2 main pieces coming back in a Hellebuyck trade. And I might even argue in a Scheifele and Dubois trade as well, depending on where they go. So that should be the main focus here is trying to, however you go about this, and it doesn't have to be a rebuild necessarily if young pieces end up coming back in these deals, but it should just be a focus on, we need to get the best young cost-controlled talent that we can moving out these guys. And again, being in the market that is Winnipeg, you're able to hold these guys inside the franchise for a number of years. And we've seen this team surprisingly have really good success at retaining high-end players. That's never been the issue here with the Jets, which is, I mean, really bizarre, but it's kind of what their whole franchise depends on in terms of being successful. They've shown that they can keep guys in the fold. They need to do a better job, in my opinion, of finding the right fits and the right players to come in and then grow with the team and then want to find a way to re-up and stay here in Manitoba long term.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, for every Jacob Trouba or Pierre-Luc Dubois, you can go down the list of the likes of Scheifele and Josh Morrissey and Connor Hellebuyck, all guys that, extended here. And, credit goes to the way they run their operation. I mean, they do treat their players first class. You hear that from every player that comes through Winnipeg, whether they're on the team or in the past. And, and that's incredibly important for them to be able to do that. But back to your talk about the package, I mean, I couldn't echo your thoughts more. To me, the key to this deal, and even if it doesn't include a first-round pick, if your prospect of that young player is better, but I mean, we're talking about a player, that's 21 or 22 years old. You've got that window under team control. And listen, there's going to be tons of opportunity for young players like that. If guys like Dubois and Scheifele are sent packing, it could actually be a pretty attractive spot for, younger guys that might be, well, similarly to some young defensemen on the Winnipeg Jets, just not at the spot in the depth chart where they can really dive in and get that responsibility and opportunity in a big way next season.
Yeah. I mean, there's a few guys out there, right? I mean, obviously, I don't know if we can the province of Manitoba can collectively get a vision board together and manifest Quinton Byfield to come down. Is that a possibility? We could do that. That's he's the crown jewel of all the young pieces that are available. I just think he's either months or a year away from popping off.
Now is the time to jump on a player like
that.
Exactly. I brought up Byfield, a number of times on this program as the exact type of player that, listen, if you're giving away big assets to a team that's looking to win now, that has the opportunity to extend these players, you need to have something come back that, could potentially turn into the production and effect on the ice of those guys that you've had. And it might be a perfect window because he hasn't really popped as of yet. And the Kings, I think, do feel that they are very close. But it would take a lot to get Byfield out of there. But, just because of the way that team is built and the fact that he was, I joke and say, hey, you don't see second overall picks traded very often. But then I remembered, actually, it does happen. It happened here with Patrick Laine going to the Columbus Blue Jackets.
Yeah, and another second overall pick is playing in the Cup final in 2 days with his second team, right? So they don't get traded at the draft, but they do get traded a few years down the road. I mean, maybe at a surprising amount there. But, I mean, LA obviously, I think, makes the most sense as a trade partner with the Jets. I mean, even Alex Turcotte as well. Obviously, a tier below Byfield, but a guy that hasn't really gotten a chance or elevated his game just yet. I mean, LA makes a lot of sense. The only problem with trying to pry Byfield out of LA to me is twofold. Is one, it's going to, I believe at least, it's going to cost more than just one of the Jets pieces. Could it possibly be two of those guys to get Byfield out of there? Because LA, I mean, there's a ton of value in them having a guy like that making very, minimal money and potentially giving you $7-8 million worth of cap hit if he's able to pop off this season, right? So there's that part of it too. The other thing is do you have to take back Cal Peterson's contract to make a deal work there, and how competitive will the Jets be?
That might be part of it for sure.
Yeah,
I mean,
right?
He's got 2 more years at $5 million, and he was basically stuck in the minors this year because he just couldn't stop anything.
Yeah. So I mean, it's kind of, I mean, it depends how negative you look at it, but I think if you were able to get Byfield out of LA, that would be amazing. It probably means the Jets suck this upcoming year. But are you willing to eat that for being a more healthy franchise 2 to 3 years down the road? Well, that's going to be the debate that you need to have there. The other name and team that I'm intrigued is the New York Rangers, who have kind of been sniffing around, I mean, since the Trouba trade, but they've been sniffing around Winnipeg for quite some time. And you talked about maybe not filling all your needs in each trade, or one guy gets you a forward, a goalie, defenseman, but Braden Schneider, to me, makes a lot of sense as a guy that the Jets could go after here in Winnipeg. Clearly you look at the depth chart out there with the Rangers, and he's kind of languishing on the third pair, and there's not really a massive opportunity for him to leapfrog some of the guys that are ahead of him. He's got some Manitoba ties playing with the Wee Kings there, and you wonder if either Dubois or Scheifele, if they're the ones to head out to New York for a little bit more scoring punch down the middle. If a guy like Braden Schneider doesn't make a lot of sense as the centerpiece of a trade there, who can slot in, maybe maybe he comes in on your second pair and you have Sandberg Schneider together as potentially your second pair of the future, or you throw him right there with Josh Morrissey and let those two get cooking.
Hey, before we go, Buffalo is another team that has been prominently rumored to have interest in Connor Hellebuyck. They've got Devin Levy, who they expect to be with the club and sort of their goalie of the future. So I'm not sure this would be for more than the 1 year. But when you look at to be Buffalo is such an intriguing team with the assets that they put up. If Buffalo is interested, where does your ask start for the Sabres?
Yeah, it starts with Levi. I don't know if it would be anybody else but Levi with Buffalo. I'm not a major believer in some of their younger guys. I mean, like Cousins is going to be off the table.
Yeah, Cousins was the guy. I had hoped that they would sniff around a year ago when they were talking about potentially trading Mark Scheifele to focus on him, but that ship has sailed right now. I mean, the opportunity to buy low and buy early on a guy like Cousins, that's left the building.
I think that's exactly where I'm at in that it's a year too late. I don't know. I don't see Buffalo as a viable trade partner for the Jets because if you're Buffalo, does it not make more sense to sign Freddie Anderson, Varlamov, like one of these veteran stopgap goalies to a year or two, and then have Levi officially ready to take the reins a couple years, as opposed to giving up all these assets for a guy that might only be there for a year? I don't know. It seems counterintuitive to how Buffalo's built up the rest of their team. I don't know. I feel like that makes a lot more sense. Or maybe they make a move for a guy that's not at Hellebuyck's level. They trade for a guy with a couple years left on his deal, and then him and Levi can split the pipes for the next little bit. But I'm not really holding my hope out on Buffalo being the team. But if they want to throw Devin Levi the other way, then yeah, we can probably figure out a deal pretty quick.
And of course, they did have 2 first-round picks last year, and Matt Savoy, who we know quite well, at 9th, and then Noah Ostlund at, I believe, 18th or so. And I'm sure both of those players, I believe, are centers. And, that would be, another sort of prospect, but I don't think that could be the centerpiece of the deal.